night to all you ladies and gentlemen out there, whenever you are watching this. Today, we're going to dive into the iconic time travel universe of Back to the Future. That's right, we're going to look at a movie about time travel, a DeLorean, and having a love relationship with your mother. Wait, what kind of movie are we even looking at? So the year is 1985. Ronald Reagan is president. Everybody is wearing weirdly short shorts. And Huey Lewis in the news is playing on everybody's radios. We're then introduced to Marty McFly, a teenage kid who somehow is friends with a mad scientist. Already, that is your first red flag. If you are friends with a scientist who's got crazy hair and none of his inventions work, take that as your red flag numero uno. But anyway, Doc Brown, the mad scientist, is like,
Marty, I built a time machine out of a DeLorean.
you know, like any other reasonable man in his 60s would do with his free time. But the question is, why a DeLorean? Who knows? Maybe they wanted to go with a fancy looking toaster oven with wheels.
So this is where I think the movie takes a little bit of a turn. So, as you can see, Doc ends up going through all important dates that the time machine can go back to. For example, the birth of Jesus. But the problem is that one of the dates that pops up is November 5th, 1955, which is the day that Doc hit his head and came up with the idea of the flux capacitor, which sits in the back of the DeLorean, and it makes time travel even possible.
Full beginning of the movie, Doc dies. And Marty is racing the Libyans that killed Doc in the Twin Pines parking lot. That's the mall, which Marty ends up going 88 miles per hour in the DeLorean, which sends 1.21 gigawatts of electricity into the flux capacitor, sending him back in time. You know what I'm saying? Marty accidentally, how do I say this politely? Screws up and has his mom fall in love with him instead of his father, and now he has to try to make his parents fall in love, or, you know, the big plot twist, he'll stop existing. Time travel is insanely chaotic, but in Back to the Future, it takes a whole new extreme to that idea. You got alternate realities, paradoxes, and moments where you're like, oh, if I think too hard, will my brain explode? And let's not forget about the whole butterfly effect, people. If you don't know, the whole idea of that is you step on a butterfly, kill it in the past, and travel to the future. It's going to be a completely different timeline. So let's say I go back in time. This is the past. And I high five some dude. Then I go back to the future. I'll end up being in a completely different future than I in the past. The best way I can describe it is by this video from Back to the Future 2.
Imagine that this line represents time. Here's the present, 1985, the future, and the past. Prior to this point in time, somewhere in the past, the timeline skewed into this tangent, creating an alternate 1985. Alternate to you, me, and Einstein, but reality for everyone else.
Now the problem with this butterfly effect is Marty's dad, George, is a wimp. He is a loser. Loser with a capital L. But the problem is he can't go up to his dad and be like, yo, you gotta stop being a wimp. Because he doesn't want to mess up the timeline. It's understandable. Nobody should want to mess up the timeline. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's gotta try to make his dad fall in love with his mom instead of him, so he can still exist. He is trying to stop serious ripple effects in the space-time continuum. Like, come on.
How could I have been so careless? 1.21 gigawatts! Tom, how am I going to generate that kind of power? It can't be done, can it?
Let's talk about the one thing nobody likes to bring up about this movie. And I'll be the first one to bring it up. Marty's love life with his mom. Yeah, we gotta address. The whole point of this movie is Marty's gotta make his parents fall in love with each other once again. How that happened in the first place was Lorraine, who was Marty's mother, her dad was driving home one day, and then all of a sudden George fell out of the tree, got hit by the car. Lorraine felt bad and went to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and that's where they fell in love. The only problem with that is that George fell out the tree. Marty saved him. Lorraine is now in love with Marty. So somewhere in this process, Marty's mom thinks he's the hot one. She felt bad for him as well. So that's where the problem starts. He's got to find a way to his mom fall in love with his father without telling him, going back to that previous point, don't be a wimp. And now what I think ends up resulting from this is probably one of the weirdest romances in history, because you got a guy who is her son, doesn't want to do anything with his mother, and then you got the mother who has a son from the future that she doesn't know is her son, and that she's falling in love with. Most uncomfortable romance in cinematic history. I think the part that bugs me the most is that they were in the writer's office and someone was just like, I love it. Honestly, let's be real. Doc Brown is a legend. His hair alone is basically an indication that, this guy has seen some shit in his life. He's got crazy hair. He's a mad scientist. That's another part. But you gotta admire the guy. He built a time machine when all logic otherwise says that it is impossible. And he just did it just to show that he could. Also, why are the most chaotic people in cinema the ones who we like the most? Like, is it that hard to make a character that is likable, that is not crazy? I just need to know one thing. Why did they choose a DeLorean? Like, they could have chose many other cars back in the day. They could have chose a sedan. But here's the problem with that. Personally, for me, a sedan wouldn't have the same effect. If you see a DeLorean driving down the road, you don't see many DeLoreans. If you see one of those, you're like, that's Back to the Future right there. But if you see a sedan, you see a lot of those. And you're going to be like, Back to the Future, Back to the Future, Back to the Future. Which is why I think this works so perfect. I think the reason why they went with it was because it looks futuristic, and it's really cool. Also, in the movie, they come up with some of this reasoning.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style? Besides, the stainless steel construction made the flux dispersal. Look out!
Which they could have made that debate about any other car. But I think that this car, it was the perfect car to choose. And they did a great job with it. Yes. Marty's saving the entire timeline with rock and roll. Now, we got to this part because he ended up getting his parents to fall back in love. Him and George set up this whole thing about how George was going to go over and punch Marty and save Lorraine because Marty was going to be a weirdo. But that all got changed when, as we know, the antagonist Biff decided he wasn't going to stand for that. He ended up going in the car and he tried to get freaky with Lorraine. Biff was his bully. George's bully for his entire life. And he finally stood up to him and hit him square in the face. Look at this video. But that's the thing, is that he stood up to his bully, finally. And I think that sends a great message. Stand up for yourself. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Marty saving the entire timeline here. Saves it with rock and roll because he ends up playing Johnny Be Good at the end. Duh, why not? But even before that, he's playing, and he's playing the song that his parents have their first kiss to. Sealing the deal, sending the timeline back, and Marty and his siblings exist. Oh, I think it's important not to forget the fact, also, that Doc Brown found a way to make the time machine go back to the future with a bolt of electricity? You know, the usual everyday science stuff. Oh yeah, I shot a car into the future with a lightning bolt. That's the type of shit he's on. Like, the beginning of this movie went from, help, I just messed up my parents' relationship, to something like, hold my guitar, I'm about to do something fucking legendary. What did we learn from this movie? Well, time travel is very messy. Doc Brown is a motherfucking legend. And if you ever have the chance to go back in time and see your parents as teenagers, especially your parent of the opposite gender, run away as fast as you fucking can, because that shit will get dirty. And you may not even end up existing after that. Thank you, Robert Zemeckis, for creating this amazing movie. I don't know what I would do without it. This movie holds a very special place in my heart. I'll talk to you guys later. Or maybe I already talked to you in the past.